What's going on, everybody? This is Daniel Harms of the RGR Football Channel, film analyst. Today is Tuesday. We're continuing to creep closer and closer to training camp. So what does that mean? We're going to look at some roster bubble battles and really get into some of the positions that I'm looking forward to watching battle it out in training camp. Who's going to be closer to that bubble? Who could possibly make it? Who could miss it? Surprise, here, there, make it, miss it. We don't really know who's going to be, but I think that there's some names here that could shock you and surprise you that are going to make this roster or miss it come the end of training camp into the regular season. Let's get into it. We're going to start at the corner safety position, that secondary area. I assume myself, that there's going to be 10 roster spots, okay? So, getting to the corner position first, we know, going in depth with how the Chiefs drafted, they put 5 safeties and corners. They drafted 5 secondary members in Trent McDuffie, Brian Cook, Nazeeh Johnson. You can go into Joshua Williams. Did I say Trent McDuffie? Because he was their first round draft pick. So there's 5 guys that are rookies on this roster that the Chiefs brought in because they think that they're in desperate need of a change of mentality at corner, shall we say. When I was going back through the film, because I have a Nick Bolton film review coming up, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be so much fun. That was a lot of fun to go through. But when I was going through it, there was a lot of, let's just say, errors from the corners in Kansas City last year. Rashad Fenton, Charvarius Ward, Mike Hughes, all of these guys had some real issues with the deep ball, okay? We understand that defense runs through the safeties in the back end there. They try to funnel to the safeties. But if you get one-on-one on the outside, it was pretty easy to complete some passes down the field with against some of the better offenses and receivers in the NFL and some of these teams they played near the end of the season last year. So there's positions that are going to be up for battle. They've traded for Lonnie Johnson. We know that DiCaprio Bootle has some safety corner hybrid ability, but let's just talk about the guys we know are pretty much locked at this point. I assume Lonnie Johnson's a lock to make the roster. They traded for him, bring him in and play with Justin Reid. I believe that was not only a request made by Justin Reid, but also something you can help get better out of Lonnie. He's a young player still. He's a 4th-year guy. He's going to be 26 this year, or he is 26. He's going to be with Justin Reid. I think they play well together and they like playing with each other. L'Jarius Sneed is going to be I imagine your starting slot / outside in the 2 like they did last year when they have 2 corners on the field. Your first round draft pick, Trent McDuffie, is the guy. So if we assume that the Chiefs have 10 guys, 5 and 5 safeties, 5 corners, that leaves 2 spots. DeAndre Baker, Rashad Fenton, Lamons maybe, depending on how his offseason stuff goes. You're also looking at Jalen Watson, Zane Anderson, DiCaprio Bootle, the Joshua Williams. These are the guys. Nazeeh Johnson, I think Nazeeh is more of a safety, but still, lots of defensive backs, lots of corner possibilities. That's a lot of people vying for 2 roster spots at corner. So what's it going to be? Who's going to pick it up? I think there's a surprise out here. I think Rashad Fenton might end up off this roster. I know he's played a lot of really good football for Kansas City. I will never take that away from him. But I think, much like Charvarius Ward, the style that he plays is not conducive to winning in those one-on-one situations. He's had some real issues with guys that are more physical and really can get downfield and have speed, that when they don't really let the Chiefs corners press very much. He could be on his way out. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen. It's more of a surprise. Like if he's surprise cut, he could be on that bubble, especially if Lamons makes it and his off-field stuff checks out and they like Lamons as a special teams guy that leaves 1 corner spot. Who's it going to be? I don't know. I think Joshua Williams is a really, really good corner. I think he's better. Eventually, he's got a higher ceiling than Rashad Fenton. I don't know. That's just me. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. Now let's get to the safety position, because I also think that DiCaprio Bootle has some interesting options here, because you can keep 5 safeties. And if you have a guy like DiCaprio Bootle who plays corner and safety, you give yourself a little bit of a different flavor. Same with Rashad Fenton. So he could save himself that way. So let's just not rule him out, because obviously I don't ever want to rule these guys out. I think he'll make the roster. It's just something that's more of a surprise that I'm looking out for because of the mentality and the style that the Chiefs are trying to get away from, I think, personally. But getting into safety, you've got Zane Anderson. We know Justin Reid and Juan Thornhill are going to be in 1 and 2. Brian Cook will be that 3rd safety. Those are 3 spots. Boom, done. There's 2 spots left. I personally believe that Deon Bush is going to make the roster as a special teams guy. He was brought over from Chicago. He's not going to be a guy who vies for starting spots. He's not going to be that kind of player. But what he does do is he plays special teams. And that was one of the big reasons I think that the Chiefs brought him in. And one of the biggest things that we know last year, lots of players that played special teams that were some of those back end roster guys. Nick Bolton, excuse me, not Nick Bolton, ridiculous. Ben Niemann, Dan Sorensen's the guys that played those positions on special teams and safety and on the defensive spot. They're gone. There need some replacements there. This is a spot you can get some of that. Armani Watts is a guy who played safety and more of a backup, but also had special teams roles. I think Deon Bush can fill that. You do that, you got one more spot left for a bunch of different safeties. We talked about Zane Anderson, Devon Key, who was getting reps last year, DiCaprio Bootle, Nazeeh Johnson. All of these guys we're looking at, like, who's going to make it? I'm interested. This is going to be a very, very fun camp battle. There's 10 roster spots. Really, when you consider it, we know that there's really more like 2 or 3 or 4 at most. Who's going to win? Who's going to take him? My personal belief right now is we will see Rashad Fenton on the roster opening day. I don't think his leash is going to be as long as it was last year. I think Joshua Williams is going to be readier than people expect him to be. I also think DiCaprio Bootle makes the roster as a safety / corner. I think he has that versatility. I think he takes that next step this offseason and competes and has a very good season and can be that guy. I'm not sold on Lamons. We'll kind of figure out. Like I said, he's got his own baggage. The Chiefs signed him relatively quick or late, excuse me. So that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Jalen Watson, maybe. Corner, maybe. Probably not. I don't think Zane Anderson's ready. I don't think Nazeeh Johnson's ready. But yeah, I do think that Joshua Williams has a very good chance to make this roster, make as a true backup. You can have some other guys play special teams, whether that's Lamons, whether that's Deon Bush, which I think those guys will make it too. So that's what I think. We're going to see how it shakes out. It's going to be a lot of fun because these are some of those are two of the most versatile and really kind of defensive hinging pieces that the Chiefs really need. They're going to have a huge overhaul on the back end. It's going to be very, very important to get those spots right. Now we're going to switch over to defensive tackle. This is a very, very, very quick one, honestly, because there's not very many defensive tackles on the roster. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the 90-man roster. There's only 7 defensive tackles. Tells you a little bit about how they feel about their guys that they have. We know Derek Nunny, Chris Jones are 1 and 2. I'm assuming Tershawn Wharton's making this roster. That's 3. They've only ever kept 4 really defensive tackles on the roster. That leaves one spot for 2 guys, in my opinion, which are Colin Saunders and Taylor Stallworth, who was signed over from Indy this past offseason. This defensive tackle group is very, very, very limited. It's lacking depth and it's lacking star power outside of Chris Jones. Derek Nunny is a 2-man, is a 2-down positional guy. And Wharton, for everything that he was, his rookie season really didn't do much last year. He took a step back, and he's not taking a step forward. So we got to see him do more this year to guarantee himself a roster spot. I want to see Colin Saunders on the roster to make the roster over Stallworth. He signed a 1-year deal this offseason, so he's not locked into a position. But this is going to come down to those two. Who's going to make the roster spot? That's what I think it's going to be. I don't think that Cortez Broughton or Kanadi Hassan have options to really make the roster. But who knows? These guys could surprise. I imagine that Stallworth or Saunders makes it. I'm going to lean Saunders because I know that he has run stopping ability, also with the athletic upside. He's only 25 years old. I think he can do it. I think he can make this roster. I think he can surprise some people this year. So defensive tackle is going to be very short. Like, the reason it's up here on the things that could happen, and one of the things I'm most interested in seeing, is because Saunders, Stallworth, and Wharton, if he doesn't take a next step, he could be in danger if Stallworth comes in and plays better and actually provides some real rotational value. And I think that Wharton is going to be challenged to take that next step. Maybe they have him play a little bit of defensive end, a little bit of defensive tackle. That would be very, very interesting to see. It's going to be Jones, Nunny, Wharton, and Saunders. But we'll see. I want to see Stallworth up close. I want to see how he does. Now let's get to running back, because this is an interesting dynamic that the Chiefs have outside of Clyde. We know Clyde's going to be the starter. I'm very 100% positive about that. I assume Ronald Jones will be the 2. Maybe. Haven't heard very much about him in OTAs and stuff like that, outside of he's not doing the best. Ryan said that on one of the Monday shows, that he hasn't been the best, but obviously there's still a lot of time left. Then there's Derek Gore, Jerick McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco, which a lot of people want to make the roster. I think he could be the kick returner, so I think he's almost a lock, but we'll see. That's never a real thing. There's no locks, especially for rookies, 7th round draft picks. There just aren't locks. Interesting with Ronald Jones, if he doesn't show up in training camp and he's not playing well, they can very easily cut him. His contract is super easy to get rid of. It's super easy to just acknowledge and be gone. If he doesn't show up in training camp, see ya. They just re-signed Jerick McKinnon, which, in my opinion, says that they're looking for somebody else to help on those 3rd down spots. They didn't like what they had. They have Clyde, who's not been the best on those 3rd down areas with pass protection. He's gotten better, in my opinion, from his rookie season to his 2nd year. But outside of that, there's nobody else that could really do it. We know Ronald Jones hasn't been very good at it. That's why Leonard Fournette took his job and never gave it back. Isaiah Pacheco, very unproven in the NFL. Obviously there's Jerrion Ealy as well, but he's never going to be a 3rd down back. He's a scat back. He's very small, more like a running back wide receiver. I'm not sure he's going to make this roster at all, to be honest with you. He'll probably be a practice squad guy, which I'm totally okay with, because he's got some talent. If you guys just go watch some of his Ole Miss tape, he wore number 9 in college. He's a lot of fun. So he could be someone maybe next year when things are less murky in the backfield, then maybe he can find himself a spot. But the 3 guys that we're going to focus on, because I think Ronald Jones will be the 2. I think that's how it's going to shake out. That leaves 2 roster spots, in my opinion, for Gore, McKinnon, or Pacheco. You guys know how I feel for the most part, but, what happens? What happens if Derek Gore comes in and just blows these guys away? Steps up in pass protection. Like, he couldn't easily make the roster. What if Jerrion Ealy comes in, really just kind of blows up, just has really, really good pass catching upside, and they can't really stick him on the wide receiver spot, so they have him that running back / wide receiver role? What happens? Like, this is going to be fun. I want to see the young guys come in with Clyde and establish themselves. See what you got. I want to see Gore. I want to see Pacheco, and I want to see Ronald Jones. Show me something. You guys, basically outside of Clyde, there is no guarantees. So someone's got to come in, step up, and be the guy. The number 2, the number 3, number 4. Boom. Put yourself in. Pacheco has some real legitimate speed and ability in the open field. That's why I think he's going to be the kick returner. So I'm interested to see how that shakes out. I imagine it's going to be Clyde, Jones, McKinnon, and Pacheco. Assuming that's how it rolls out myself. I know a lot of guys, there's a lot of Derek Gore fans. I love the undrafted guys. Always root for these guys to be better, but I think that the talent is better elsewhere. I really do. There's one guy that I think is going to make the roster that people don't really understand and don't really remember. And a little while ago, it was Jermaine Carter, the linebacker out of Carolina the last couple years. He stacked up 88 tackles last year. Watch for him to possibly push to make this roster as that last linebacker over Rose. It'll be difficult for him because Rose is more of an athlete in space and be more of a coverage backer, but don't rule it out. Veteran presence and understanding of defenses plays a big, big role in making rosters, especially if you can play special teams, something he can do. So make sure you guys, in the comments, what I want from you is give me one surprise cut, one surprise make that you think is going to make the roster. I want to hear your guys' opinions on who you think is going to not make it this year and who's going to make it, because there's going to be so much turnover. It's going to be a lot of completely new faces, and it could be anybody's game. So make sure you tune in tomorrow for my film review on Nick Bolton. It's going to be awesome. You guys are going to have a lot of fun with that. Make sure you tune in Thursday for the Chief from the North. And as always, you guys have a great day.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.